There is a moment you know too well, a moment so small it feels harmless, where your body locks up and your mind starts negotiating, where the hard thing stands in front of you like a door you've already decided not to open. And in that silent half second, you tell yourself you'll do it later, tomorrow, when you feel ready, when motivation arrives, when fear loosens its grip, and you don't realize that this moment, this exact hesitation, is where most lives quietly end. You've carried this longer than you admit, this strange weight of knowing what you should do while watching yourself refuse to do it. And the shame doesn't come from failure. It comes from awareness, from seeing the pattern repeat and realizing that your mind, the very thing you trust to protect you, is the one sabotaging you every time the stakes rise. This is not about laziness, and it never was, because lazy people don't feel this pressure in their chest. They don't feel this ache of unrealized potential humming under their skin. They don't lie awake at night replaying the moments they backed away. And if you're listening to this, it's because you feel it. The tension between who you are and who you could be, and you're tired of pretending it's normal. What they never told you is that your brain is not designed to help you do hard things. It is designed to keep you safe, comfortable, predictable, and alive. And the moment something threatens that comfort, even if it's good for you, even if it's growth, even if it's the thing that would change everything, your brain pulls the alarm and floods your body with resistance disguised as logic. You're not broken. You were never taught another way. The truth is uncomfortable, almost insulting, because it means the voice telling you to stop, to delay, to avoid, isn't wisdom or intuition or self-care. It's an ancient survival program misfiring in a modern world. And every time you obey it, you reinforce the belief that you are someone who backs down when things get heavy. This is the point of no return, because once you see this, you can't unsee it. And the question becomes brutal and simple. Will you keep letting an outdated system run your life, or will you learn how to override it? You're not imagining this. The resistance feels real because it is real. It's chemical, electrical, physical, and the reason affirmations fail you and motivation videos wear off is because you've been trying to talk yourself into action instead of commanding your nervous system into obedience. This is forbidden knowledge for a reason, because the moment you learn how to do hard things without waiting to feel ready, you become dangerous to a world that profits from your hesitation, and the override method begins exactly where comfort ends, in the space where your body says no and you move anyway. Here is the lie that trapped you early, so early you don't remember learning it. The lie that says you must feel motivated before you act, that clarity comes before movement, that confidence is a prerequisite, and that fear means stop. And once this idea took root, every hard thing became optional, negotiable, delayed. But look closely at your own life, at the moments you're proud of, the moments that shaped you, and notice something quietly devastating. None of them happened because you felt ready. They happened because something in you moved despite the fear, despite the doubt, despite the internal screaming. Your brain learned the wrong lesson from those moments, because instead of learning that action creates confidence, it learned that relief comes from avoidance. And every time you avoided something difficult, your nervous system rewarded you with calm, teaching you that escape equals safety. This is how the cage was built, not with bars, but with relief. Every hard thing you avoid teaches your brain one thing, that you need protection from effort. And every time you comply, the threshold rises, meaning the next hard thing feels even harder, heavier, more threatening, until even simple actions trigger the same resistance once reserved for danger. You survive things you still don't have words for, and your brain adapted to protect you. But now that protection has turned inward, guarding you from growth, from discomfort, from the very friction required to become who you know you are meant to be. And here's the part that stings. The reason self-discipline feels like punishment is because your brain perceives it as a threat. Not because it hurts you, but because it removes the illusion of control, and the brain hates nothing more than losing control. So it creates stories, elegant ones, convincing ones, stories that sound like you, feel like logic, wear the mask of reason, telling you it's not the right time, you need more information, you should rest, you deserve a break. And every one of these stories has one function: to delay action until the threat passes. But the threat never passes because the threat is the action itself. This is where most people lose because they keep trying to win arguments with their own mind, not realizing the mind isn't looking for truth, it's looking for comfort. And comfort always votes against growth. The override method doesn't ask your mind for permission, it bypasses it entirely. Think of it like this. When you touch a hot stove, you don't debate, you don't analyze, you don't motivate yourself. Your body moves instantly, automatically, because the survival system takes over. And the override method uses that same system not to escape pain, but to enter it on command. This is the reversal that changes everything. You don't wait to feel ready, because readiness is a feeling created after movement, not before it. And the moment you understand this, the illusion collapses, because now you see that every time you waited for motivation, you were asking the wrong system to lead. The body moves first, the mind follows, and the override method trains you to act before thought can interfere. This is not willpower. Willpower burns out. This is neurological leverage. You don't argue with resistance, you step through it so fast it doesn't have time to speak. Here is the first psychological shift, and it will feel almost offensive at first, because it removes your excuses without attacking you. It simply exposes the mechanism, the truth that resistance is not a signal to stop, it's a signal that the action matters. The stronger the resistance, the more important the action, because the brain only defends against perceived threats, and growth is always perceived as a threat before it becomes familiar. This is why the hardest tasks are always the ones that would change your trajectory: the phone call, the workout, the conversation, the work session that demands your full presence. And this is why your brain escalates its tactics right before you commit, flooding you with doubt, fatigue, distraction, suddenly remembering everything else you need to do. This is not coincidence, it's defense. The override method begins with a single rule that feels too simple to work, and that's why it does. You act within 5 seconds of deciding, not because 5 seconds is magic, but because it's shorter than the brain's delay loop. The moment you decide, you move your body, not your thoughts. You stand up, you open the document, you put your shoes on, you make the call, and you do it before the negotiation begins. You don't aim to finish, you don't aim to do it well, you don't aim to feel confident, you aim to initiate movement. Because movement is the kill switch for hesitation. This is where people sabotage themselves. They think the hard part is the task, but the hard part is the transition from stillness to motion. And once that transition happens, the resistance drops dramatically, almost suspiciously, as if the monster guarding the door vanishes the moment you step inside. This is not motivation, it's physiology. Your nervous system cannot sustain high resistance once action begins, because action signals safety through engagement, telling the brain that you are not freezing, not fleeing, not helpless, and the brain recalibrates accordingly. This is why starting feels impossible and continuing feels manageable. The override method exploits this gap. You don't tell yourself you're going to do the whole workout. You tell yourself you're going to put your feet on the floor. You don't tell yourself you'll write the chapter. You tell yourself you'll open the file. You don't tell yourself you'll change your life. You tell yourself you'll take the next physical step, and you do it immediately. It's okay to feel this resistance. You're allowed to want more, and wanting more means accepting that discomfort is no longer a stop sign, it's a compass. The first time you do this consciously, you'll feel something shift, a quiet authority emerging. Not loud, not dramatic, just a sense that you moved without permission, and that feeling, that subtle reclaiming of control, is addictive in the right way. Because now the predator-prey dynamic flips. Your brain is no longer the predator dictating terms, and you are no longer the prey obeying its alarms. You become the handler, the one who decides when discomfort is entered and when it's ignored. This is the moment your life begins to make sense. But here's the hidden threat they never warn you about. The reason most people who learn this flirt with change and then retreat, because once you override your brain once, it will escalate. It will fight harder next time, throwing bigger emotions, heavier fatigue, louder doubts. because it has learned that its old tactics no longer work. This is where most people misinterpret the process. They think something is wrong, that they're regressing, that the resistance means they should stop, when in reality, the resistance means the override is working. Every system resists being replaced. The brain is no different. So the second layer of the override method is this. You expect the resistance, you welcome it, you plan for it, because surprise is what gives it power, and predictability is what neutralizes it. You stop asking, why is this so hard? And you start saying, this is exactly how it's supposed to feel. That single reframe removes the emotional sting, because now discomfort is no longer evidence of failure, it's evidence of alignment. You don't try to eliminate fear, because fear is just energy without direction, and the override method teaches you to ride it instead of resisting it, to let it fuel the movement rather than block it. You walk into the discomfort deliberately, slowly at first, then with more confidence, until your nervous system learns a new association, that hard things don't kill you, they clarify you. This is where discipline stops feeling like self-punishment and starts feeling like self-respect. You're not forcing yourself, you're training yourself. And training implies repetition, patience, and forgiveness when you slip. Because slips are part of rewiring, not proof that you're weak. The hidden thread is that once you learn this, you can't go back to unconscious avoidance. Because now you'll see it every time it happens. The moment you hesitate, the moment you rationalize, the moment you delay, and that awareness will either sharpen you or torment you. Most people choose to forget, to numb, to distract, because awareness demands action, and action demands courage. But you're still here listening, which means something in you is ready to cross the threshold, not perfectly, not permanently, but deliberately. And the override method doesn't ask for a lifetime commitment. It asks for a decision in the next 5 seconds, again and again, until those decisions stack into a new identity, the identity of someone who moves when it's hard. Because every predator has a predator, and fear's predator is action. Now listen carefully, because this is where the override method stops being mechanical and starts becoming personal, where the technique turns into a mirror. And you begin to see why you've struggled in ways you never fully understood before, because the truth is not that you can't do hard things. It's that you were taught to identify with the voice that resists them. From the moment you were young, you learned to say, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, I'm not ready, as statements of identity instead of temporary states. And the brain loves identities because identities don't have to change. They just have to be defended. And once resistance becomes who you are instead of what you feel, every hard thing feels like a threat to your self-concept. This is the core revelation, the thing that quietly rewires everything. You are not the voice in your head negotiating avoidance. You are the one who hears it. And the override method works because it creates a gap between stimulus and identity, between feeling resistance and obeying it. This is where you pause, not to hesitate, but to notice. To say internally, there is resistance, instead of I am resistant. And that tiny linguistic shift does something profound. It removes ownership. It turns the emotion into an object instead of a command. You don't need to like this feeling. You don't need to feel inspired. You don't even need to believe in yourself. You only need to act as if the resistance is background noise, like static on a radio you no longer try to tune. This is where many people listening will feel something stir, a mix of relief and fear. Because if resistance is no longer an excuse, then what's left is responsibility. Not the heavy kind that crushes you, but the clean kind that clarifies you. If this is landing, even uncomfortably, take a moment later to reflect on it, because awareness is the beginning of authority, and authority over your own actions is the rarest form of freedom. If you find yourself returning here, listening again, you already know why. Because something in you recognizes this as truth. And truth has weight, it lingers, it pulls you back. You're allowed to want more, and wanting more doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you honest. There are micro moments every day where the old you and the emerging you briefly collide, moments so small they're easy to miss, where you almost sit down instead of standing up, almost scroll instead of starting, almost postpone instead of proceeding. And these are the moments where the override method is either practiced or abandoned. You don't need to transform your life in one heroic act, because the brain resists sudden identity shifts, but it responds to repetition, especially when the repetitions are small enough not to trigger panic. So you begin to collect these micro wins, not to celebrate them loudly, but to register them quietly, the way a predator tracks progress, calmly, patiently, without emotional fireworks. You notice how it feels to move when you don't want to, not the discomfort, but the aftertaste, the subtle sense of alignment, the internal quiet that follows action, the way self-respect feels heavier and more stable than fleeting relief. This is how trust with yourself is rebuilt, not through promises, not through vows, but through evidence, through showing up again and again in moments no one sees, moments that don't earn applause but do earn something far more valuable: internal credibility. You survive things you still don't have words for, which means you already know how to endure discomfort. The override method simply redirects that endurance toward your own growth instead of just your survival. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the internal dialogue changes. Not because you silenced it, but because it learned it no longer has veto power. And like any voice that isn't listened to, it softens. This is what it feels like when discipline stops being an act of force and starts becoming a relationship, one built on consistency instead of emotion. You walk into the moment you usually avoid, and your body reacts instantly. The tight chest, the shallow breath, the impulse to delay. And instead of backing away, you stay. You feel your feet on the ground, the weight of your body, the reality of the room around you. You notice the urge to escape, the mind reaching for distraction, and you don't fight it. You don't shame it. You simply begin the smallest possible movement forward, your hand reaching, your posture shifting, your attention narrowing to the task directly in front of you. You feel the resistance peak, then wobble, then thin out, like fog breaking under sunlight, and you realize something quietly shocking. The fear was never as solid as it felt. It only needed your stillness to survive. As you continue breath by breath, action by action, you feel a strange calm settle in. Not comfort, but focus. The kind that feels earned, grounded, real. And in this state, you are no longer arguing with yourself. You are moving with yourself. This is where power lives, not in aggression, not in force, but in alignment. In the moment your actions and intentions finally point in the same direction. You're not imagining this. This is what it feels like to be integrated, to stop splitting yourself into the one who wants and the one who avoids. And for the first time in a long time, you feel whole. But there are layers still unfolding, questions that remain deliberately unanswered, because mastery is not given all at once. It's revealed in stages, and the next layer of the override method is not about starting, it's about sustaining, about what happens when novelty fades and resistance evolves. Because your brain adapts, it always does. And soon the 5-second rule won't feel as sharp, the initial rush of control will normalize, and a new question will surface quietly, almost dangerously. What now? This is where most systems fail, because they rely on excitement, on momentum, on the illusion of permanent motivation. And when that illusion dissolves, people slip back into old patterns without understanding why. But the override method was never about excitement. It was about command, and command deepens with repetition, not novelty. There is a deeper mechanism waiting, one that turns discipline into identity, identity into momentum, and momentum into inevitability. But it requires something even rarer than action. It requires consistency without emotional reward. And that is where the next threshold waits, just ahead, unseen but felt, the place where most people stop and a different kind of person continues. There is a quiet moment that comes after the initial victories, after the first weeks of moving when it's hard, when the resistance no longer screams but whispers. And this is the most dangerous phase because it feels neutral, ordinary, almost boring. And boredom is where most people lose what they fought to build. This is where the rhythm breaks. You wake up one morning and nothing feels urgent, nothing feels dramatic, nothing feels like a battle. And the old you would have taken this as permission to drift, to loosen the grip, to assume the work is done. But the override method reveals something colder and more precise, that mastery is not proven in moments of intensity. It's proven in moments of quiet. This is where you learn the final truth about discipline, that it is not a personality trait or a burst of will. It is a relationship with discomfort that has matured beyond emotion. And when emotion leaves, structure must remain. You don't feel inspired. And that's exactly the point. Because now the work is no longer powered by fear or ambition or desperation. It's powered by identity, by the simple, grounded belief that this is what you do, regardless of how it feels, regardless of who is watching, regardless of whether today offers resistance or ease. This is where most people disappear, and it's why so few ever cross into real power, because they confuse intensity with importance and boredom with failure. Not realizing boredom is the sign that the nervous system has adapted, and adaptation is victory. You stand at this threshold and feel the pull of the old life, the ease of drifting, the comfort of justifying, and for a moment it's tempting to step back, to tell yourself you've done enough. But something in you is different now, quieter, heavier, more settled, and it doesn't negotiate. It moves. This is where the override method becomes invisible, woven into how you live instead of something you consciously apply, because the strongest systems are the ones you no longer think about. You don't ask yourself if you should do the hard thing. You ask yourself when, and that single shift changes the entire internal conversation, because now delay is logistical, not emotional. You build environments that support motion, not comfort. You remove friction where it helps and add friction where it protects you, shaping your surroundings so that action becomes the default and avoidance becomes inconvenient. You don't rely on motivation, you rely on placement, on routines that trigger movement automatically, on cues that bypass debate, and this is where discipline becomes elegant, almost ruthless in its simplicity. If you've stayed this long, if you've listened without flinching, you already know this isn't just theory, it's recognition. And recognition carries responsibility, because now you can't claim ignorance. You see the pattern, you feel the choice, and every day becomes a quiet test of who you are becoming, not judged by others, but by the standard you've set for yourself. And if this path feels lonely at times, if it feels like you're moving differently than those around you, that's not a flaw. That's the cost of stepping out of the average rhythm, because the moment you stop negotiating with your own resistance, you stop being easy to relate to. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. One day, without ceremony, without fireworks, you realize something has shifted permanently, that the hard things no longer feel like threats. They feel like signals, markers that tell you exactly where to go next. And you no longer ask why your life feels different, because you know. You stopped waiting. You stopped asking permission from fear. You stopped mistaking comfort for safety. And now when resistance appears, it doesn't paralyze you. It sharpens you, because you understand the rule that governs everything you've learned here. The rule no one tells you, because it dismantles excuses in a single stroke. The life you want is on the other side of the actions you avoid most, and you walk toward it anyway. Click on the screen to watch the next video on how this knowledge changes what happens next, what most people never realize after this moment, and what you will start seeing differently from now on. Click on the screen to watch the next video on how this knowledge changes what happens next, what most people never realize after this moment, and what you will start seeing differently from now on.